Welcome to The Sovereign Shift, the podcast for women ready to reclaim their voice, their nervous system, and their power in a world that demands they stay small. I'm Chelsea Eden Dubeau, founder of The Sovereign Shift, creator of Woo Breathwork, and your guide on this breath-led journey into sovereignty of self, system, and spirit. Each episode, I sit down with powerful women, thought leaders, everyday revolutionaries, and allied voices to explore the real, raw, and radical path to embodied sovereignty. We talk about stress, burnout, addiction, motherhood, balance, sexuality, leadership, and breath-led spiritual awakening. And yes, we go deep into all things woo, the divine feminine, altered states of consciousness, intuition, ritual, and the parts of womanhood that have been exiled or dismissed as too much by patriarchal systems. Here, truth is medicine, breath is power, and your sovereignty, non-negotiable. Let's begin. Okay, welcome to this episode of The Sovereign Shift. On the show today, I've got Catherine Crestani, who is a leadership coach, intuitive healer, podcaster, author, and international speaker. She empowers mothers to find their voice in business, family, and health, starting with self-leadership. She has a book called Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice for Lightworkers, Healers, Psychics, Mediums, Shamans, Energy Workers, and all souls called to shine their light. It's described as a must-read for anyone with a spiritual business or starting their own journey into spirituality. So, Catherine, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for having me, Chelsea.
My pleasure. So let's dive right in. I'm curious when it comes to the topic of your book, spiritual ethics, and it's a practice for light workers and shamans. I'm curious what inspired you to write this book?
There's a story. There's always a story. So I channeled pretty much this book, which means I got it intuitively from God, source, divine, whatever your listeners resonate with when they're listening. But how it started was when I was unpacking my spiritual reawakening, towards the end of that journey with my spiritual mentor, I asked, how can I channel for people? Like, how can I help them through their guides to get information like she was helping me? And then my other question was, and is there anything I need to know to do that? So the first answer was, you already know you can channel for people. And I was like, yeah, okay, fair enough. I just wanted to check. And then the second answer was, but by the way, here's these guidelines. And these 7 pillars came through, and that's what they actually call them, pillars. And I was like, oh my goodness, this needs to become a book. There's more to come for this, but this needs to become a book. So that was probably the end of 2021. And then I went through my little journey and everything kept growing. And then a friend of ours, she went, actually, there's not 7, there's 9. And I went, oh my gosh, there's 10 things. I said, there's still 7 pillars, but there's 10 things altogether. So it kept evolving. And then it got to towards the end of last year, and I started writing this novel, which I was channeling. And I said to my spiritual mentor, did you want to write this book with me? Because she's channeled the information. She said, no, it was always meant for you. I was just the conduit to get you started. I was like, great, thank you so much. There'll be a dedication to you in the book. Don't you worry. So then as we continued through that, it got to January of this year. And I literally got a kick in the back. Like it was a, and I was like, what is that? They're like, you need to write this book. I was like, but I'm finishing this other novel that nope, you need to change your focus and you need to write this book. All right, give me a week. So I had a week to finish this other book, the edits, put that aside and swap into this gear of writing the spiritual ethics book. And as I started to write it, I was like, oh, this will be really quick. This will be great. And then they're like, no, you need to put you in it. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, you need to put your examples about what happened to you because people need to know this is happening to you so that they understand that you're in this book. And I was like, okay, all right. So I did that. And then I thought, great, we're nearly done. They're like, no, you're not done yet. So then every pillar and guideline, and the point is they emphasize it's a guideline because you always use your own discernment and you use your choice on how it applies to your life. But then every pillar ended up having connected to a chakra, which is fine. I knew about chakras. Then it was connected to an auric layer. I didn't know much about auric layers, so I had to go research that because I had to understand what I was writing too. Otherwise, I couldn't give it through fully because there's a reference list in the back. And I wanted to point out to people the reason there's a reference list is because I had to go understand what I was getting so that I could fully transmit that in the highest way possible so that anyone reading it could understand it too. And then there was a crystal connection. Then I thought, oh, great, that's it, we're done. No, there's more. So then they said there's a guide, like a deity or a god or an angel for each pillar as well, and each guideline. Then there's a spirit animal, a plant ally, and I was like, oh my goodness, are we done? And then I sent it to my editor, and one of the chapters I had a spiritual ethics practice in there, like a spiritual hygiene one. And you need one of these in every chapter. And I was like, all right. So then I went back and I was doing that. But at the same time, I created all these courses over these years developing, and I had all these meditations and I had all these really cool practices. I was like, oh, now I get to use them. So they all went in the book as well. So it was such an evolving process. But the other reason why I feel like there was such a drive for that, and I met so many people who, Chelsea, you've probably had one too. They've had some bum experience with a person in the spiritual world, and it's just turned them off it. Then unfortunately, it's even with coaching too. You have one bad experience with somebody, and it turns you off the whole field, and then everyone gets lumped in it. So I went to this tarot reader, and they knew nothing about me. And I was like, I said maybe they just weren't getting a clear reading, but they should have just owned that too. But at the same time, the people don't understand that the information you get in that moment is right for that time, but then you can go make a different choice as you walk out the door because you've had that information and then nothing happens. That's such a the thing too. But I've gone for a crystal alignment massage or something like that and left feeling like my energy had been stolen from me. And I was like, oh, what is this? It was horrible. And I remember ringing up my mentor. She's like, yeah, you got to be careful who takes your energy because a lot of people don't realize that they're doing it. And some people do know that they're doing it. And that's how they keep their energy up too. So there's all these kind of things. And then as I was evolving this book, fortunately through my podcast, I was interviewing all these beautiful healers and light workers and alternative health practitioners around the world. So I said, hey, before we finish up today, what would you want to see in a book like this? And it was really reinforcing, Chelsea, and really lovely because a lot of what they said was what I that already had in there, or it was like, oh yeah, I know confidentiality seems like a no-brainer, but maybe we do need to put it in writing just so people have that conscious reminder not to go talk about their clients at the shops in case their friends walking by and things like that. So it was really nice to see it evolve and then to actually have it and have to fruition. And when I actually got a copy of it and I was like, oh my gosh, it's real, then it felt like the journey was complete.
Oh my gosh, there's so much I want to dive into. Channeling being one of my favorite topics as well, because we need to take it's woo, but it's not woo. We want to take it's functional magic, right, as far as I'm concerned. But back to the spiritual ethics aspect, when you speak about having a rotten experience with a practitioner, I think that happens a lot more than I think is talked about. And
Mm.
for a while now, I've wondered if that's a symptom of the larger awakening that's happening, where people will awaken and they get really excited and they don't know what to do with this information. And so they go through that spiritual babyhood where they're like, oh my God, I've got all this information coming at me. I guess I'm a spiritual healer or a teacher or whatever. Do you think that's contributing to an aspect of the problem?
Yeah, and then it's the ego versus the intuition.
Mm.
And there's a bit about this in the book too, because as you're unpacking it all, it's really hard to start to discern between your ego voice that's coming from your head and that beautiful inner voice that's coming from your intuition and your heart. And the more you practice, the ego gets really tricky to discern from because it will start to sound like your inner voice because it doesn't want to be shut up. It doesn't want to be pushed to the back. It doesn't want to be second. But in saying that, the ego is not a bad thing. We need to become friends with our ego and know how it works because then when it comes up and go, thank you for keeping me safe. And then as long as you listen to it to a point, but not take on it as your pure advice, it helps you tune in more to your inner voice. But at the same time, people talk about ego death and things like that. Yes, there is an ego death, but I feel it's more an identity death because you have to allow your soul to evolve and shed the layers. and your ego's always there. And I still remember doing this meditation, and I was going into my heart chamber, and I was like opening all these doors that I've shut off. And I opened this door, and it was like really dark and creepy. And I was like, what's in here? And I'm walking in, and then I heard, you can't get rid of me. And it was my ego. And it was like, I'm hiding in your heart. You can't get rid of me now. And I was like, what is this? And it was just, I can laugh now, but at the time I'm
Yeah.
like, this is freaky as. And then I was like, I'm not trying to get rid of you. Because at that point, I'd heard all these people talking about ego death. So I felt like, oh, maybe I'm not meant to have an ego. And then it's no, it's about accepting it and learning how to live with that. And your ego comes up, especially when you're tired, and that comes in and it will ramp right up. And this is why you need to get really good at knowing your triggers, your wounds, your backstory, because your ego plays on those things. And the more you get to know yourself, which is actually one of the end chapters, but the more you get to know yourself, the more that you can actually go, all right, that's my ego now. So for someone new on their spiritual journey, circling back to that, they haven't got that level of discernment yet. And also they're vulnerable. So then when they go to a practitioner, they might think that they go into that savior complex, right? Where they think, oh, this person has all the answers and they're going to guide me and they're going to make me this person. So we have to get rid of that guru complex because you have the power. And that's one of the pillars as well, which is equality. No matter who you go to or who you work with, even if you're channeling, if you're working with angels, you never feel less than, and you should never feel less than. You should always just feel, okay, they're slightly more evolved on their soul journey, but they're providing me with the information so I can keep evolving. And if you're with a practitioner and they don't, this is another red flag, but if you're with a practitioner and you're new on your journey and you're asking questions and they're dismissing you, do not work with that person. If they don't know the answer and own up to that is wonderful. That shows that they're not at that ego point where they think they know everything. But if you answer the questions, they go, oh, you'll figure it out in the session. You'll get the answers in the session. But if it's from that kind of snarky point of view, don't trust that. If they're saying that's a really good question, we're actually going to get the answers to that as we go through. Different feeling, right? So you got to really learn to trust those feelings. And if you get that ickiness come up, then that's really important. And for those who have been on their spiritual journey for 5 minutes and think that they can teach everybody else and they know everything, that is a red flag for you.
Yeah.
You never know everything. I don't claim to know everything. I don't claim to know. Like, I'm looking at my book now going, oh gosh, I bet you there's going to be an edition too. Because it'll keep evolving. Because as you said, the collective is on a conscious level increasing. I only got told yesterday, about the Global Conscious Project. And I'm like, what is this? And you have an app and you can look at the percentage of awakening at that time on Earth energetically. And I'm like, why? And he's pulling it up, my friend, and he's, look, it's at 48%. And then I pulled it up. I'm like, mine's saying 62. I was like, he goes, oh, hang on, maybe I'm lowering it. Hang on, let me refresh. He goes, oh no, we're the same now. We're the same now. But he was
Maybe I'm
saying the
lowering
day,
it.
but then he was saying the day before, he's like, how are you yesterday? I said, oh my gosh, I went through so much healing yesterday. This is 2 days ago. And that's why I sound how I am, because I was purging so much stuff. I just spent the whole day writing and asking questions and getting back answers and healing and all these things. He goes, yeah, it was really low yesterday. He goes, there must have been a big purging or a big kind of shift yesterday. And I was like, how interesting. So there's all these things that keep shifting and changing. And I feel that if we ever think we know everything, then the universe is very good at throwing a spanner in the works. And that's part of the pillar willingness to change. Because if you get new information and now you know better, you need to do better. And that's part of your responsibility as well, especially if you're someone holding space for people. But if you're new on your journey, and you get new information, sometimes it's a lot harder to integrate because sometimes it will shake your belief systems to such a point that you'll be like, oh my goodness, everything I knew is no longer true. And it can feel that way. I'm not going to lie about it. Sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, is anything true? Was everything a lie? Yeah, probably. So it's just having that self-compassion too can be really important for yourself as well.
Especially when it feels like the whole ground is shaking beneath your feet and yeah, you can't find equilibrium.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how can someone cultivate a relationship with their ego? Because we need our ego, right? It's how we interface with this reality. It's not
Correct.
the enemy. And when we treat it as the enemy, it becomes that dark voice in the caverns of
Hmm.
our heart, right? That's how we create monsters, right? That's how we create demons. So how can we cultivate a better relationship with our ego to get it on board with what we're trying to do on our spiritual journey?
Yeah, so this is why I feel like practices about getting to know yourself really is really important. And that includes creating space for yourself each day to be have compassionate inquiry where you actually start to ask, why did I react that way? Or why did I do that? Or why is that so triggering? But before you even get to that level, get to know yourself. Hey, what happened at the time I was born? And I'm such a fan of numerology, astrology, human design, gene keys, whatever it might be that helps you give you a map and an idea of this is why I respond how I am. I know for me, when I looked up human design, and I don't know much about human design, and I'm not claiming to, but I remember looking at my profile going, when things aren't aligned, you're frustrated. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so true. So I knew every time I got frustrated, I was out of alignment with my soul. So then it was like, okay, how do I come back to alignment? And one day I was feeling really bitter. I was like, I don't get bitter. And then I realized it wasn't mine because we're energetic beings. Sometimes
Hmm.
we take on the emotions around us, but my husband and my son get bitter. So I was like, oh, oh, I've got this now. So it's their bitterness that I'm feeling, and I need to come back to that. And I realized, okay, great, that's not mine. I'm gonna let that go, and I'm gonna come back to me. And so this is like part of it, like getting to know yourself. Your triggers and your wounds never go away. If anyone ever claims that they'll heal you, so you never feel the bad emotions again, run the other direction as fast as you can, because you have multiple layers. And even when you get to the point where most of your days are probably the happy, and I guess that's my coach brought this up too. We were talking about the other week that our perception of happy is bliss, but that's
Hmm.
not happy. Happy is when you're at peace and you're in flow. And then you know that the next day is going to be the next and the next. But you just know that there's this flow and there's no it's that neutral state, right? Whereas we're taught that we need to be happy and joyful all the time, happy as in blissful and joyful all the time. But that's not humanity, and that's not what we signed up for. Because if you think that's what life's meant to be like every single day, you're never going to experience the highs, because without the lows, you don't get the highs. You need that contrast and you need that polarity. And there's such an important thing. There's that law of polarity. Everything has an equal and opposite reaction. It's the same with any scale. People talk about evil being bad, but good is still part of that spectrum. And what you might think is evil, someone else might not think is evil. And you have to be aware of that too. And that's when our ego can come in and start to get really judgy as well. Because the more you unpack your beliefs, the more those judgments start to fall away as well. And one of the best things I learned was when I saw someone else doing something that I was like, oh my God, I would never do that. Like, why would you ever do that? I started instead of judging, because that is very judgy, I went to, "Ah, I'm so grateful that's not my journey." And it changed the whole energy around it. And even when bad things happen, I started saying, I'm grateful for the thing, good things I cannot see. So putting that perspective on it, and people underestimate gratitude so much, and it can pull you out. And even if you can't find something to be grateful for, cling to things, right? So I'm grateful my body woke up this morning. I'm grateful that I am able to breathe this beautiful air. I'm grateful that I have a house that I can live in. And if you're someone that doesn't have a house and you're on the streets or whatever it might be, I'm grateful that I'm able to have this experience for some reason. So, whatever it might be, and that gratitude can help shift your energy very quickly too.
Hmm. Yeah, gratitude is such a it's a stated practice that we hear about so often, and it's easy to take it for granted. Oh, yes, I'm grateful. But when you actually sit with gratitude, it has
You
the
get to,
potential to completely transform your mindset, even your body, right? Like I'm a breathwork guide, and so I work with nervous system regulation, but gratitude by itself can be a nervous system regulator. Just I don't know if you found that as well.
Yeah, and I was at a talk a few weeks ago, and he said, when you're so grateful, even for the unforgivable, even for finding the good in the worst situations, he goes, you'll know that your healing is complete with that situation because you will get tears of gratitude. And it's so true because when you can see, yeah, I went through all that crap, I had all this trauma, I went through all these things, but if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be like this now, and I'm such a powerful person, or I wouldn't have learnt this skill, or I wouldn't have learnt that. If I wasn't bullied in high school, I wouldn't be really good at looking at underneath people's masks so I can see who people really are. If I didn't go through losing all my money, I wouldn't understand accepting that abundance. Now I'm at the other end. I interviewed someone the other week and she had a choice to go into the Peace Corps or the Marines, and she chose the Marines. And she said, I had to experience the extreme of war to understand how necessary it is now for my mission of peace. And I thought that is such a beautiful contrast because, like we were talking about just before with those laws of polarity, you have to go through the extremes so that you can have things come out of it. And it's amazing how many gifts get born out of that as well. Like for me, my company had to fall apart. That was my dark night of the soul, or my transition, if you will, because I had to let that go. There was so much of my ego attached to it because it was like I built it from the ground up. If anyone's built a company, it's like your little baby. But at the same time, it wasn't fulfilling me on any level. I remember writing a list of what I liked and what I didn't like. I think there were four things on what I liked, and the rest of the page were things I don't like. And even things I convinced myself with my mind that I liked. I love doing accounts. So, no, I hate accounts. I hate them so much. I don't know why. I hate payroll. I don't want to do it. And things like this. And allowing that to come up, it's really important that you just allow that. And then that's where the ego will come in and just be full blast, coming back to the ego thing, because it will just be full blast. And when you're tired or exhausted, your ego's still there. And this is why it's so important getting to know yourself and coming back to, why do I act this way? Or why do I feel pulled to this? And asking those questions can be really great way to have that compassionate inquiry, but also be curious. Keep being curious of like, why do I react that way with that? And sometimes when you learn that, it doesn't mean that reaction will go away, but it also means you can have that pause and catch yourself in that moment because you know it's coming. Yeah. I was like, and what's one example I've had? So one for me was when people left their shoes at the front door, right where you walk in. I got so angry. I'm like, you can't do that. It's so dangerous. I'm like, "Arr," and I just like lose it. And I'm like, why am I losing it? Because when I was younger, I left my school shoes, like we had this garage and there was a step down into the garage from the house. And because I was normally first up in the morning out the door to the garage, I left my school shoes there, which I polished the night before, so I could step down and put them straight on because my brain's like, how can I make this faster in the morning? Except it wasn't me who went first, it was my mum. And my mum stepped on them and she fell over and she twisted her ankle. So then my little 8-year-old self was like, no, we could never do that. No one could ever leave their shoes at the front door. And once I realized that that was triggering my ego into that safety reaction, that is when I went, oh, okay, I can let that go now. And it still irks me a little bit because I rather people just put it to the side. But at the same time, it doesn't send me into a massive reaction anymore. So it's like learning those little triggers, and they can last, especially if you've been, for me, when I left my first marriage, those triggers hang around for about 5 or 6 years before they actually start to shift and not there. For my husband, when he was married before too, but I had to give away our wok because his ex always used to make stir fries all the time to the point that he was so triggered. And if you mention the word stir fry, he won't eat them. So I can say, oh, we're going to go have some noodles, that's okay. But if we say, I'm getting a stir fry, oh no, shut down completely. So I actually had to give away our wok. And he's a bit better with it now, but it took years before he actually could let that go.
Wow, it's so amazing. Yeah, when you take the time to do that metacognition, to think about, oh, interesting, where is this reaction coming from? And you do that inventory. Yeah, it's deep work and it is not for
Mm.
the faint of heart, but it is so critical for your awakening journey. And I consider spirituality to encompass everything. It is just all encompassing. It is what weaves us together, what connects us, just like love, right? And so when you start to go into the mind, you realize how many memories are kept in the body. Right. So you have to
Yes,
go through the
100%.
body, right, to help clear all of this because it's the shoes, right? The shoes that was written somewhere in your line in your code, right? And it's just no shoes bad in this position because they are going to they're a safety issue for people. And that's trauma. That is literally trauma in action. And yeah, it's funny though. When you think about where you are now, how long have you been a channel for?
I probably started doing it the end of 2021. So what's that? What are we now? But for 4 years. But
Okay.
it's saying that the practices have evolved so much. And it's really interesting because I thought I'm just going to channel for people. And then because when you're curious, right, you see what happens next. So then I was like listening to a podcast and they were talking about medical intuition. I'm like, I need to look into this. I really need to. So I started a medical intuition course. And what I learned from that was a couple of things. So one was how to shut off my body so I wasn't feeling everyone else's pain because I had no idea that I was doing that. And then I looked back on my life and I was like, oh, no wonder why I hated going to parties because whenever I went to a party, I just put down that I was sick because of something I ate or drank, but it was actually I was feeling everyone else. And to the point where I was probably feeling everyone else who had overdrunk and I like wanted to be really sick. And the second thing I learned from that was just because you taught a tool from somebody else doesn't mean you have to use it that way. So the process I got taught was like you had to scan the whole body and then make note of everything, come back up and scan everything. But whenever I did that with people, I felt really lost because I was automatically pulled to their head and I knew or their heart or their neck or whatever. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I following this? It doesn't feel right. So then when I started doing it my way, I was like, oh, this is so much better. But at the same time, I realized that wasn't for me long term too.
Okay. Yeah, no, I only bring it up because are you okay? Yeah, I bring it up because I found for myself that channeling has also been really healing in terms of going through and doing that personal, that bodily channel, the inventory of trauma and all that good stuff. And there's, again, when you're channeling and you're connected, you're plugged into source, the divine, and it is just amazing and incredible what can come through, like you in your book. And so I'm just curious, do you incorporate channeling on your day to day? Is this something that people can learn to do by themselves?
Yeah, so I teach a lot of people, and it's in the book too. This method, this is how I started to trust my intuition more, which is just using simple muscle testing. And so you just make a circle with your things and you go, show me yes, show me no. But if you're dehydrated, it's not going to work. And my other caveat is do not use it for massive emotional decisions. So if it's like, hey, should I quit my job? Should I leave my relationship? Do not use it. So it's all about things that don't matter. What should I wear today? Should I put the pink top on? Should I put the blue top on? What jewelry might I put on? What should I eat today? And it gets you to start to listen more to what your body wants, but also that inner wisdom that you have. And then one day it just changes. So you might hear something, or you might feel something, or you just know. So for me, I have claircognizance, which means I just know things. And people freak out because they're like, how do you know that? And I'm like, I just know. Or I will call them on something and be like, and normally I have friends, and if I think of them, I message them. I'm like, hey, is everything okay? They're like, my psychic friend is messaging me because she knows I'm going through a crap time. And one friend actually called me on it. She goes, every single time you message me, if I don't respond, it's because you know that I'm going through a crap time. And you know that I just need to know that there's other people out there. And I was like, yeah, because the more you learn to trust your intuition and not put it in a drawer, I don't know, that's not mine, by the way. Someone said that. The more you learn to trust your intuition and act on it straight away, the better that you are at taking advantage of opportunities and trusting what comes through. And it makes it easier to trust your intuition moving forward as well.
That's beautiful. I'm curious as well. You mentioned that you have your husband and your son. And so, do they share in some of these practices, or are you like me, like the odd duck in the house?
It's funny. So my husband actually went and trained in Reiki, but he hasn't fully utilized that yet. But he always said to me, I've got these, I feel like my hands are meant for healing. And I was looking into like spiritual practices where I wanted to learn more. And everyone goes through a Reiki point, right? So I looked at Reiki and I went, oh, this isn't for me.
Goes through a Reiki
And
phase.
yeah, they're like, because everyone talks about Reiki, right? So I looked at it and I went, this isn't for me. I'm not a hand healer. I'm an energy healer. I work with energy, but I'm not someone that puts my hands on people. I might if I'm guided, because sometimes I'll put something like a pressure point on the foot or something like that. But generally, I don't really touch people. And with my physical body anyway, energetically, yes. But at the same time, and then I said, oh, I think this is for you. And then he read it and oh, yeah, it is for me. He's open to it, but I don't think he fully understands the scope, how far the scope is of what I did. Even we had this argument over me releasing this book because I feel like you need to release a novel first. And I'm like, this book is way more important. I need to get this book out. And he goes, but not everyone will resonate with this book. I said, that's okay. The right people will resonate with this book. This is when you trust in spirit and trusting that intuition that comes through. My son, he's a very sensitive little soul, like from a baby. He could sense presences. He will not talk to people. He doesn't like their energy on. If we go out, he says if there's more than two adults, he will not talk and he will just meow at them like a cat. And most people would go, oh, there's something wrong there. No, he just feels their energy. He feels like he knows when there's too much energy, he knows when it's too much. So we also had to teach him strategically, hey, dude, the more you ignore people, the more they just want to keep you talking. So it's better off if you just answer a couple of questions and then they'll leave you alone. So he tried this strategy with his great grandparents and then we got back in the car afterwards and we did that contrast for him. We're like, so how was it answering a couple of questions versus not saying anything? They're like, he goes, oh my gosh, they did. They left me alone. I was like, exactly. We're like, sometimes you just have to give them a little bit of something or they make it their mission to keep making you talk. And so he's very in tune with animals. Like we're pretty sure he could talk to them. But he had this incident at school because he used to see angels and he had an imaginary friend, which was actually his spirit guide. And it was funny because I had to clear my house and smudge it. And I had to put an intention in that any beings that do not belong here, you need to leave. And I felt this mum guilt because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to get rid of his like spirit friend. What if I'm like getting rid of it? And her name was Mia. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, but I need to do this. I need to do this because some spirits can be very trickster energy. Anyway, and I finished clearing and I felt great and terrible at the same time. And then she appears in front of me and I'm like, Mia, you're still here. And she's, yeah, I'm one of his spirit guides. I was never going anywhere. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? And they're like, because you had to go through the process and you had to trust that and you had to allow and see what came through at the end of it. And it was funny because a few weeks before this incident happened at school, where this kid basically said, angels aren't real. And then he stood up and went, yes, they are. But that was enough for his little brain to go, oh, maybe they're not. Because his teacher tried to save it and said, oh, what angels do you work with? And he was like, Archangel Michael. But at the same time, we've spent 2 years nearly trying to unpack that. And it's slowly starting to come back. But because it's coming from mum and dad, it's harder to trust than someone else coming. So I've been asking for someone to come into our circle that openly talks about it. So it's not or find a friend that talks about it too, so that we can help him believe in that again. So I know in my heart, and I know when I connect with his higher self that he does still believe all these things. He just doesn't want to admit it just yet because there's still that little bit of doubt that was created. It's just allowing and setting up that space. And for any parents who are listening, if your child comes to you and say they see something, please do not shut them down. Please say, okay, can you tell me about it? And be genuinely curious. Even if you don't understand, it doesn't mean it's not real. And I think this is such an important thing because so many of us have been shut down or shut ourselves down because someone didn't believe us. And if we can just have that faith from our parents and have that ability to say, okay, my parents believe me, at least someone believes me, or they don't fully understand, but they're trusting that I do. So my son and I go honor the fairies all the time. So he still believes in fairies and gnomes, so that's okay. So we go honor the fairies, and it was funny. We had this incident where he had got these beautiful little magnetic Lego block, like they're not even Lego, but these little magnetic blocks, and he was so happy. He was taking them everywhere, and we got home, and he was counting them. to make sure he had them all, and there was five missing. And he's, oh, I must have left them at the restaurant. I was like, let's go check the car. So we're pulling apart the car in the dark, which is always fun. And my husband's ringing the restaurant, and they're like, no, there's nothing here. And we're searching the whole house. We cannot find these five blocks. We're like, this is crazy. Like, where could they possibly be? And then we walk back in after searching the car, and there in the middle of the floor are the five blocks. And I'm like, call out to my husband. I'm like, did you put these here? He goes, no, I've been down here the whole time, like on the phone, like trying to find these blocks. And I was like, and my son and I just looked at each other and went, it was the fairies. And we're like, oh gosh, we better make them some cookies tomorrow. So
Yeah, it's always the fairies.
it's always the fairies. And at the same time, my husband's, oh yeah, as if it's the fairies. But he went through this phase where everything he left on his workbench outside downstairs would go missing. His gloves would go missing, but mine and my son's would be there. Actually, one of my sons went missing, and then he started to make stuff for the little fairy garden we built. And then we would just went on this walk randomly through the bush. And on top of this rock was his glove, like perfectly placed. And we're like, hey, dude, there's your missing gardening glove. Great. Meanwhile, my son, and then my husband's, oh no, it's the cockatoos and blah, blah, blah. We're like, it's the fairies. It's the fairies.
The cockatoo. The fairies are more plausible for sure.
Exactly. It's just it's this beautiful journey, and it's about allowing. And even if you don't understand, if you meet somebody and you think, oh my gosh, that maybe they're crazy, but maybe they're not. What if they're not? So this is about my favorite saying is from Ted Lasso, weirdly, the TV show. And he said, be curious, not judgmental. And I think that's something so important that we can learn to live by. And full circle back to the book when I was trying to think of a title. That's why Pillars for Life came. And because you just don't do it in your spiritual practice. Whatever you feel or whatever you learn, you have to embody into every aspect of your life as well. And I feel that's where there's that mismatch between why you get those icky vibes off gurus and things like that, because sometimes they're just a front. They're just a camera front, and then they go turn the camera off, and they're not actually practicing what they're sharing with people, or they're not evolving who they are because they've found a method that pulls people in to make money. And then instead of going, okay, this practice isn't right anymore because we've shifted or we've learned something better, they're like, oh no, but I just want to keep earning the money. So it's like this, that's where the ego can kick in again. So I think that summarizes the whole conversation. But you just have to come back to yourself and really use your own discernment with things. And the more you learn to trust your judgment and even to say yes when everyone else is saying no, I promise you the proof will come that your decision was right. It happens all the time. Like we had it where a new principal started at my son's school, and everyone was singing her praises. And I was like, I don't even want to be like, we actually pulled my son out. I'm like, I don't feel this. It just, she feels evil. Like it was making me vomit. And I get the somatic experience. So I was like, this is making me vomit. This isn't right. And everyone told me I was crazy. She's so lovely. Like all these things. And I'm like, no, I can see straight through the mask, and I can feel straight through it. I don't even want to look. Like I was just so physically reactive to it. And even my husband was like, no, there's something not right. And then 3 months later, I get this text from another mum who's quite spiritual. She's, that person's evil. Rah, 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 rah. And I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you for validating that. And I was like, oh, and this is about trusting and holding on to what you feel in your heart is right. Again, even when everyone else seems like it's not right. And if you can trust that intuition, then that's when magic happens. Like I quit my job following my intuition. I knew I had to. And once I did, then things started to shift in my life because I was waiting for them to shift, but I put conditions on when these things shift, then I'll quit my job. Instead of I'll quit my job, go all in. There's no plan B. Universe, I made the move. Your turn now. And it can be freaking scary. And sometimes they leave it to the 11th hour before you see it actually work. But at the same time, you just really need to trust.
Yeah, no, it's funny. You picked off a question that I was so curious about, which was, again, what was your advice for moms, for parents with sensitive souls as their children? So thank you. And it leads into the next question I have, which is like an intersection, because you spoke about the business, right? The six-figure business that you left, which is wild. But then also you're a mother on the motherhood journey, and that can be very spiritually, it is a spiritual catalyst. Many times it certainly was for me. But being a business owner and building a business is also a spiritual catalyst because so how have the two things just
Mm.
probably exploded your life in the best possible ways?
Yeah, so I had to, I say give up, but I was always a mum, but I had to go back to work very early. The person I hired to cover my caseload, so my background's as a speech language pathologist, and the person I hired to cover my caseload, she was losing my clients like very quickly. So even though I spent 2 months training her, showing her this is how I do it, this she went back and did her own thing. She did not take anything on. Even all the parents were like, "Oh my gosh, she's terrible." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." So at 6 months, I went back and started working again, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to spend time. I loved being a mum. Like sometimes I went crazy, but at the same time, the sleep deprivation, my child hated sleep. It was really hard. So we made it work for us. And then my husband got put in this position where he's worked, did something really terrible. And I just need to quit. And I was like, and I was like, okay, you could quit. And so he's looking for another job. And then we sat down there and we're like, okay, what you earn in a week, I could go back and earn it in a day. So why are we doing this? So I went back to work, not quite happy. Like it was really hard because I worked with children. It was really hard. And because all I kept thinking was, I'd rather be playing with my own child. I'd rather be working with my own child. That's what constantly came through my head. So anyway, then not feeling fulfilled. I was like, yeah, I'm going to keep growing this business and keep expanding this business. So I got more staff, got a bigger premises. It was going so well. And what I hadn't realized in through all of that was because it wasn't anything for me, I'd built this business on everyone else's, like, or society's expectations. And I had immersed myself so fully into it that I was working 7 days a week. I was waking up in the middle of the night. I had insomnia with to-do lists. Like my inbox nearly every morning would have 100 emails, and about 80 of them had to have some sort of response. And I'd sold a company before that. I gotten out of a partnership, and I was so excited not to have to deal with that. And all of a sudden, I got this full circle. And I would see my naturopath every week to get a box of supplements to keep me going, basically, to keep me surviving because my system was so fried. And so I had all the things, adrenal fatigue, chronic stress, burnout, all those things. And I wasn't getting to do what like my number one value is spend time as a mum and be really present and be able to. There was this saying I heard, it said you could be a woman, like a mum with a career or a career. A woman with a career or a career woman. And I thought that is such an important thing, an important distinction, because I want to be the woman with a career, not a career woman. And even after I sold my company, I stayed on to keep working. And yes, all the stress, I actually joked with my boss that I said, "You bought my stress. Thank you so much." But then the company started to fall apart, which was almost like an ego death in itself because this company I built from the ground up, because I wasn't at the helm anymore, it just started to fall apart. And I had to let that go too. I had to mourn that and go through that. But then I was still hanging on. And I said to my husband, like, I can't do this job anymore. Like, I really, like, he goes, but it's so easy. And I'm like, it might be easy. I might be really good at it. But every time I go, a part of my soul feels like it's being chipped away. But people were like, but you're helping people. So many people will go, your jobs must be so rewarding. You get to help children to speak. And I'm like, it is, but it's not lighting me up. It's all good that, and I knew I was good at it, and I knew I cared, and I tried to weave in my spirituality, but so much. Some clients I had, they were really beautiful. They let me do other stuff with their children, so I got to do energy work on my clients and things like that. And some kids who had come to the end of their speech journey, I had this one child, he was even a child, young adult, I guess, so he was 16, and I taught him how to meditate, and he has autism spectrum disorder. So whenever people tell me like, oh, I can't meditate, I'm like, if I can teach a black and white child with autism spectrum disorder to meditate and quite well, then you can too. And
Mhm.
so then I got to work on all these energy practices with him, which was really great too. But I knew we could only do it for so long before the funding he was getting would go, hey, why does he still coming to you? He's fine. I was like, yeah, I know because I did my job. But at the same time, we're working on social things. And as that kept evolving, I just got to this point and we decided to sell our house because intuitively I was like, we can't be here anymore. There's a whole story with that. But then it came to the end, and in March of this year, I gave my resignation letter into my boss, and I put a condition on it. When our house sells, I will quit my job. And I was like, giving him this letter, and I'm like, oh, I should have written the 30th of April. And I know in my heart still I should have written the 30th of April, but I didn't. And then what was happening from March was I started to get this numbness. This is where you were saying like your body holds all this wisdom. So this numbness and nerve pain started in my left pinky, and it got so bad that I couldn't feel half my face. And I remember driving home from work one day, and my husband rang me, what's wrong? And I was like in tears. I'm like, I cannot feel half my face. I am really scared and I'm really concerned. And because I knew is autoimmune. So I was like, I am really worried. I thought it was a chiropractic over adjustment. And part of it was that. I tried to get into this new chiropractor that I found, but I had to wait to get an initial assessment, which is fine. That's their policy. So I had to go back to the original chiropractor that I feel did it in the first place. So I had to put my ego aside and just be like, I just need some sort of correction. So that helped the numbness in the face, but the numbness didn't go. And then I worked with this beautiful couple, and they said, until you shift the underlying cause of this, the numbness is going to stay there and it's going to just keep getting worse. So my husband trying to be logical, oh, it's from playing the keyboard, it's from this, it's from you typing, it's from, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's numbing. I'm numbing myself to go to work. I said, this is where it's coming from. I know that's what it is. And sure enough, I have this whole beautiful cohort of people I know and who I work with. And I went to all of them, and it would shift for a few days and then it would come back. And it would shift for a few days and it would come back. And I got to this point at the end of April, and I was meditating with my coach. We were doing an energy healing kind of session. And he's what's your voice say from your heart? And this non-negotiable message came up, Chelsea. It's quit. It was just like, this is your last warning. And before that, I'd been getting autoimmune coming into my field. And even this beautiful couple that I was working with, they said, if you get an autoimmune, you can reverse it. But my God, it's hard. They go, you are on the edge. And I was like, okay. They're like, you can't keep doing this. And I was like, all right. And so this message came up, and I'm not going to lie to your listeners. I had the biggest fight with my husband. I was like, I need to quit my job. He's like, where are we going to get the money from? Why can't you just hang out till a house sells? I said, I need to quit my job. I said, I don't care. Like, I don't care. I said, you need to go back to work. I need to quit my job. And he's like, "Rah, rah, rah." Like, why do you even want to be a mum? And I'm like, you've had your chance. You've been stay-at-home dad for 6, 7 years. I want to be a mum now. And it sounds really weird because I am quite an ambitious person and I'm an overachiever and all those things. But my heart is just, I just want to be at home with my son and to be a mum. And so he's fine, quit. I'm like, that's all I needed to hear. Thank you very much. So then on the Monday, I rang up my boss and I said, I've got a date for you. It's the end of the month. He goes, have you sold your house? And I said, nope. He goes, oh, I thought I had more time to find somebody to replace you. And I was like, I told you 2 months ago, dude, you should have started looking then. And also, not my problem. And then my beautiful boss comes in, and I have no things against my boss. And he goes, like, why, like having this conversation. I said, I just can't do this job anymore. And he goes, he looks at me, goes, I understand. He goes, I thought it was me. I said, no, I love working for you. You're so easy to work for. I said, nothing's too much trouble. And he goes, thank you. So he's basing his own worth story, thinking I was quitting because of him. And then I'm sitting there going, no, I just want to be a mum. And then when my last day, he came in and we were having like, he goes, just take whatever you want. He goes, I don't care. Just take whatever you want. He goes, I want you to be, you've worked so hard for me. I really appreciate it. He goes, if you want the iPad, take the iPad. I was like, oh, great. Thank you. I'll say yes to an iPad. Thank you for that abundance. And I said, can I take the pot plants? Because he told me when bought the business, he goes, they won't stay alive under my watch. He goes, yes, take the plants, take the plants. And anyway, but he said to me, he looks across at me, he goes, you need to rest. He goes, you need to rest. Go be a mom and go rest. And so this is a man that is meant to be my boss, but he could clearly see that I wasn't okay too. And I still had this argument with my husband for ages, and he went through a whole thing because if anyone's been in this situation, when you shift dynamics like that, when he had to step into his full masculine role of going to go earn money again and provide, it was a massive ego. It was a crazy month, May. That's all I'm going to say. It was a crazy month. And it's saying that 2 weeks after, so when I gave my resignation for 2 weeks, I had no numbness. And I went and saw my new chiro, and she said, nerves are funny things, it might come back. And I feel like she must have got that intuitively because in the next 2 days it came back, but it was different. It was just in the palm of my hand. And it came back a little bit the week before I quit because, as we all do, I had this panic going, oh my gosh, should I offer to steal C cups? Where's this money going to come from? And I was messaging my spiritual mentor, and I was like, because she messaged me, she says, is everything okay? And I'm like, she does what I do to people, right? I was like, no, this is what's happening. She goes, no. She goes, it's your time to support your husband in a different role, and he needs to support your family now. We need to have this shift. And I was like, okay. And then my first day after I'd quit, like my last week, my first day on the Monday, every single symptom was gone.
Wow.
Every single,
That's
and it didn't
incredible.
come back. And it's funny because sometimes when you're sleeping and you wake up with a dead arm, then I still have that freak out. Oh my gosh, is this numbness from this numbness? I was like, oh no, it's okay. It's okay. It's come back. It's all right. But it just shows like the more you ignore your body, the more you're going to end up in tragedy. And it's not through a bad thing because our body is there. And the reason why we have this expression, why we have these body expressions, is because if we didn't have that, we would die. It's our body saying, hey, your nervous system is not okay, or your emotions are being unchecked here. You really need to tap in to see what's aligned with your soul right now and address that and allow it to come back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That intuitive knowing about oneself is so important. And I think for you, I think as women, we get really good at ignoring ourselves and our needs. And actually, that kind of leads me to the question. I'm curious, as a spiritual mentor yourself, what do you see as being the greatest challenge that women face right now on the spiritual path?
I think it's being believed because so often we're gaslit and we're ghosted or we're made to question or the magic gets taken away. So I learned very quickly to stop sharing stuff with my husband because he would just try and take the magic and put the logic into it. And I would share with my son, and he's, oh yeah, I can see that too. But it's about finding that support as well, because when you are going through that spiritual journey or even your own involvement, it doesn't mean you have to be a spiritual worker, but you're just unlayering and doing that healing. You need to find people who support you. And sometimes it's not your family. And don't ask your family for advice. And I know that sounds really weird, but I've learned this on so many levels. They don't get you. As much as you think they should, they don't understand you completely. They don't understand your soul history. They don't understand your history. When you start to ask family for advice, I have a client and she's determined to start her own business. And I know she's going to be really successful because I can see her timeline. But her family are like, oh, what do you know about starting a business? And you don't have the ability to do that. And just that day, because she is in a coaching group with me as well, our coach had said to us, don't go to family for advice. And then sure enough, all these things were coming through. And this is the biggest thing as a woman is just, and we've got to unpack all these witch wounds. So many of us have had witch wounds. If anyone's wondering what a witch wound means, it just means you were persecuted because of your gifts, essentially. And it could be as simple as you were a midwife and you used herbs to help ease the pain of the person in labor. And because you were connected with nature and knew what herbs to go and find, you were persecuted. That's the extreme that the witch hunt went. It doesn't mean that, because there's a lot of conditions from the church, which is where the people who actually started the witch hunts, but there's a lot of conditions that if you worked with nature or you were connected with nature and you weren't listening to what the church told you, then therefore you must be a witch and you're evil. There's a lot, and even I was helping my cousin through her spiritual journey, and I was on the phone to her, and she's, oh, my sister said that I should speak to you. And I said, oh, I've got a story for you. So when I said to my mum, she said, why are you selling your company? And this is 2 years ago. I said, well, I want to channel for people. And she said, oh, we come from a line of white witches. I was like, what? And she goes, yeah, it's why we're so intuitive. She goes, your great grandmother on the Irish side, so my mum's mum, she goes, yeah, she used to do like things for people all the time, like she and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, what? And then so I'm sharing this with my cousin, and but then she had her other grandmother was very Catholic. So then she's there fighting with these beliefs that she was brought up with and try to wrestle with this idea of a witch as well. So it's really interesting because I see so many people embracing that whole witch thing now, especially on Instagram. So many people say they're a sea witch or a home witch or some sort of
Hmm.
witch or higgy witch or and I was like a witch is just someone really connected to nature and connected with themselves. And even when you look at a spell, it's actually just an intention or a manifestation. When you look
Hmm.
at amulets, it's about energy protection. So the more you be curious about these things instead of judging them, it helps more fall away as well.
No, I
That
love
went on a
that.
really weird tangent.
No, I love that. I just have a couple more questions and then yeah, I love chatting with you. I feel like we could probably chat for days. But I'm curious to know, maybe it's a two for question. So one kind of what comes to mind when you think of personal sovereignty, especially from that holistic perspective, spiritual, all the things layered in between. But also, how do you then help your clients navigate their journeys? So, like anybody listening who is really interested in working with you and your gifts to help them on their journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the first part of that question, it's remembering that I had this beautiful thing that remembering that we are a blessing from God and that we are here to bless others. And part of reclaiming your sovereignty is taking your power back from all aspects of your life. So even a lot of guests who I've interviewed on my podcast, like alternative health practitioners, and we talk about taking your power back from the doctor because so often you'll go to the doctor and you'll go, oh, this is what's going on. And they don't really listen to you and just give you a prescription and then you move on. That's actually giving your power away because you're not being heard. You're not allowing that and you're relying on them to tell you what's wrong with you as well. And it's not that there's something wrong with you, it's just your body's giving you signs that there's something that needs to be shifted, right? We are born sovereign, but from the moment that we're born, we have all these conditions being placed on us. And part of returning to your sovereignty is reclaiming your power and unshedding those beliefs, or people will say stepping out of the matrix, if you will, because nearly everything we've been taught is probably a lie. I question everything. And even the discussion about flat Earth versus round Earth, I don't even participate in that. And I was like, you both have really valid things. I have no idea, and I don't. But in saying that, I'm like, this doesn't impact my life whatsoever, so it doesn't really matter. Right now, I'm living here, this place on Earth, and if I want to go catch a plane to the other side of the Earth, I know how to do that, and it doesn't matter if it fits what model or not. Really using that discernment and your sovereign self is just being able to strip down the layers so that you can let your soul shine and be this beautiful, authentic version of yourself. And your life story up to this moment, as much as you might think it's boring, it will inspire somebody else. Because even when I was going through this, I was like, oh, I didn't have a big trauma. And then I was like, oh, actually, I did. I watched my company have to burn down to the ground. I was like, yeah, that is traumatic, but it's a different trauma. And I guess it's where we have to try not to compare ourselves to other people because it's just you can admire other people, not even admire, let them be your inspiration, I want to say, because admiration's even giving your power away. So, if someone inspires you, by all means, let them inspire you to keep growing and evolving. But if they stop inspiring you, go find someone else that does. And then in terms of how I help people unpack it, it really depends what level of their journey are on. And being an intuitive healer, I just hold space and I don't plan anything. Even when I do my podcast, I don't plan anything. And I just am really open and trusty, allowing whatever comes through to come through. And I see the most magical things. Like I had a client come in a few weeks ago and she was so tired. Like I could feel she was soul tired, like tired beyond her bones. And they just heard she needs to lay down and rest. So I was like, great. So we went into this space that I have, and we already have a massage table. I said, you just need to lay down and go to sleep. I said, I'm going to put you in a meditation, but that's all you need to do. And so she was just being held essentially by Mother Earth in this beautiful meditation. And I went to work on her. And it wasn't just me because I hold space. So plants showed up, animals showed up, angels showed up, celestial beings showed up, so many beings were ready to help this beautiful woman. And as I'm working on her, her little inner child comes up. And I was like, oh, because normally I help people because I'm all about empowering people so they know how to do it themselves, right? Because the more I teach them, the more that they could go do it themselves. And this is, I don't want their power to be with me. I'm happy to be a guide. I'm happy to support them. I am not your savior. I will tell you right now. I'm here to support you and challenge you and get you to this amazing creative state, but I'm not going to let you stay in your victimhood. I will challenge you out of that too. And a lot of people don't resonate with that because they want to come and have everything done for them. And I'm like, nope, wrong person. But in this case, the inner child came forward and I got from my guides, you need to do the inner child work for her. And I was like, but I don't, can I do that? Is that breaching like soul contracts or soul? They're like, no, her soul is so tired. She needs help to release this. And her soul, like, and so it was like I was a mediator. So from in my mind's eye, I could see her little 2-year-old self and her soul, and they were there. Like having this discussion, which I was mediating between the two and just observing and taking down. And what came from that was these affirmations that she had to say to reinforce the new patterns that had come through because she wasn't present, well, present, her conscious self wasn't present. That's how it would reinforce through her life and keep that pattern happening. Now, if I was really closed off and be like, nope, I can't do that work for them or whatever, she would have missed out on that beautiful healing. And it happened twice. So that it had her 4-year-old self or something like that came and had to do the same thing. Had to write. Actually, there was 3 versions of her child, inner child we had to work with. So I'm just there. And then I finished and the plants are still working. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, and she was in such a deep sleep, like she was snoring, like she was gone. And I was like, oh, do I wake her up? They're like, it'll be okay. And I was like, all right. So I just sat there and I just held space. And the plants finished up working. And then sure enough, she shakes herself up. She's, oh. And I was like, welcome back. And it was just this perfect timing. And she comes out of it and she goes, I had no pain. And I had no idea till a week later. She said it was the first time I had no pain in years. And I was like, it came back because there's more layers to unpack. But at the same time, it was allowing her to have that space. And in contrast, I had a client the other day and she was still quantum entangled to her ex. And what that means is that often our energy will intertwine with someone else's energy. And especially if they're really traumatic or abusive relationships, it's very entwined. And it's not by your doing, it's almost their doing because they're such energy sappers or energy vampires or narcissists or whatever you want to say. But they're sucked into the energy. And so we had a very different session where I had to help her untangle these cords which had latched into her. So she was actually physically pulling them with her body to try and disconnect them from herself. And this is the beauty of being an intuitive healer. I don't know what's going to come up, but we just trust it. We just trust that's right for that person in that moment. And so for her, she learned something new and how to bring in flowers. So for her, she needed flowers. Flowers have been coming up a lot lately, but she needed flowers because she needed that reminder of her beautiful divine feminine self. And then a rose came to her and said, don't forget about your thorns. Because as much as we can be these beautiful, delicate women, at the same time, you still need your thorns for your boundaries, right? You have your values, you have your standards. If someone comes in, you poke them. No, this is not, nope, non-negotiable. This is not happening. And then in similar things, when I was helping my cousin through the start of her journey, that we were really doing a lot of learning too. Like, I'd like people to know I've got all this beautiful wisdom that I get gifted or I learn. It's one of my superpowers, if you will. But when I was helping her unpack it all, we go ask the questions and we be curious about it too. It's okay, why is this happening? It's okay, let's ask. Let's be curious. Let's go in deeper and let's get the understanding behind what we're doing. Why do you need to connect to your higher self or your oversoul or your Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it? And so that's your true being. That's your soul without all the beliefs and everything thrown in. So if you can connect to that, you're going to have a whole heap of other stuff. And that's usually, if I have clients on the spiritual journey, that's one of the first things that we work on is getting connected to your higher self, because the power that comes from being able to do that is massive, and lets you be more discerning. It lets you tap into who you really are. It really depends on where the client is when I work with them, but I'll always come at the level that they need, and I'll never leave them. I don't like leaving them feeling, I don't know, I didn't understand a single thing that happened there, or I don't know what happened. And I always trust too, because spirit always has a way of making it land perfectly for them too.
Beautiful. Catherine, thank you so much for your time today. How can people listening get in touch with you, or how can they reach out to you and work with you?
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. I'm on Instagram a lot, so my handle's Willow Healing, and then SH, so Willow's WILLOW, then Healing HEALING, and then S and a H. I'm on there nearly every day. You can check me out, talking about something, sharing my podcast. I've also got a Substack, which is willowhealing.substack.com, and if you sign up for the free newsletter, you will get my podcast straight into your inbox, as well as a little, I want to say, empowerment piece each day of the week. One day of the week. And also my website is willowhealing.org, and that's where you can check out what offerings I have. But if you're not sure how you want to work, I do have a free 30-minute coaching healing call, and I promise it's not a sales call. I purely just want to serve and help you with wherever you're feeling stuck and give you some power, and so you can go back to your sovereign self.
Oh, that's beautiful. That goes back to those spiritual ethics that are woven into your work. No, I think that's really beautiful. And I'll make sure to put all of those links in the show notes for folks as well. But Catherine, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today and for this conversation. I hope that you can come back and we can keep talking more. I wanted to get more into channeling, but you've got so many layers. So
I'd love to do that, Chelsea. Let's
oh,
have another
amazing.
conversation.
Okay,
Yes.
amazing. Thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. If something's stirred within you today, that's not an accident. It's a shift. To go deeper, visit thesovereignshift.ca, where you'll find breathwork audios, resources, mini courses, workshops, and programs to support your reclamation, body, mind, and soul. Like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and toss us a follow on social media if you're so inclined. And remember, your breath is your power. Your truth is your compass. Your sovereignty is the revolution. Until next time, stay sovereign.